Hey, if anybody can hear me, just please stand by because I think Google's having an outage right now. All right, let's try this again. If you can hear me, press 1. The fuck? Uh, hmm. Yeah, it seems like Google is having a whole lot of issues today, or at least the last hour or so. There's been an outage for Gmail, and now it's having an outage for YouTube as well. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'll see what we can do. Yeah, this is not going very well because I can't get into the Black Brain Trust email, and then I can't get back into my own email now. So um, definitely some issues happening over at Google. It looks like on their page as well that people are complaining about this. So
I,
that's why we're late.
I've got everything going through pretty good here. I was wondering why we were late, so I had to go through a whole thing to sign in and all that through Zoom. So I don't know what's going on, but everything's working fine on my end.
Hmm. Yeah, Google's having some kind of outage the last hours or last few minutes or so. So it says on their page.
No,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, let me jump into this as soon as I can because we don't have a whole lot of time. I can't do exactly what I wanted to do, but we'll make it work. All right, so welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 285. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video as possible, and there will be a docket at the end of the video once it's all completed. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, this one is from defensenews.com. Despite record budgets, the U.S. Navy is short hundreds of millions for maintenance. The U.S. Navy is short hundreds of millions of dollars for ship depot maintenance this year and is already looking at just shy of $1 billion in unfunded maintenance in 2020. Shortfalls that threaten to upend progress toward improved readiness and clearing its maintenance backlog. During a mid-year review of 2019 budget spending, the Navy found it had more than $3 billion in emergency costs that needed to be covered, including nearly $1 billion for ship depot maintenance. And while it's unclear to what degree the 2019 and 2020 shortfalls overlap, there is at the very least, nearly $1 billion in unfunded ship repair, meaning the fleet will need to find money or defer to later dates, according to three sources who spoke on condition of anonymity. That move could have a cascading effect that means other ships may not get the full maintenance packages they need, putting pressure on an already beleaguered ship maintenance system. The shortages come in a year that saw a record $750 billion defense budget. That means that while the Navy should be toasting its good financial fortunes, it will instead be scrambling to find money to fix its ships because of everything from President Donald Trump's border wall to hurricane relief to addressing problems with public-private housing ventures. The Department of Defense is rapidly closing in on a $4 billion cap Congress set on how much money can be moved between accounts to pay for mid-year surprises. Those surprises almost always include ship maintenance costs that increase once workers at maintenance yards pop the hood and discover new problems. That in turn is forcing the Navy to take a fleet-wide look and identify what issues are most important. A triage process that ensures that some issues that could be addressed in scheduled maintenance availabilities today will instead be pushed off and become more expensive in the future. The Navy is also hitting capacity at both public and private shipyards and is having to defer maintenance simply because there is no room at the end. The problem is exacerbated by a reduction in overall amount of money Congress allows for the Pentagon to reshuffle in any given year without having to ask lawmakers for new legislation and new authorities in that year. In years past, the DoD had $4.5 billion of authority to reshuffle money. In 2018, that was reduced to $4.25 billion, and in 2019, the year that's causing the problems, that was reduced to $4 billion. We can't reallocate the way we have in the past, and a defense official with knowledge of the situation who spoke on the background. Things like things like the border wall, they didn't cause the shortfall. They contributed to our ability to address and mitigate the shortfalls. We've got this. We got the sources. We just can't reallocate them. So, U.S. Navy is shaking the cup and begging for change. And from what it looks like to me, I wouldn't want to go to war if my ships haven't had an oil change. What do you think about that, Nicole?
Sounds like military unpreparedness.
Mm-hmm. I would say so.
Sounds like unpreparedness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at this sideways. We're spending so much money supposedly on the military, and your ships haven't had an oil and filter change. That's I'm something about this. Am I missing something? I don't know.
Christopher Clipper in the chat says that the U.S. Navy closed too many shipyards too quickly. I'm not a Navy analyst or expert, but that sounds like that may have exacerbated the issue as well. I know we have a few shipyards over here on the East Coast, from Maine all the way back to Boston. There's a few shipyards, so those things seem to always be backed up as well.
I'm missing on that one. So he very well may be right. So I'll somewhat take his word on that. I'm not a Navy man myself, I wouldn't really know. In fact, my roommates, everybody, they were the Air Force or the Army, so I haven't had anyone in the Navy. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But if we are closing up a lot of shipyards, and that might mean that we may not, we may be short on force there. I don't know. It doesn't sound good. I'm just saying this from what I'm hearing here. That doesn't sound that good, but difficult to say kind of where we are, because I don't know if Christopher has any other information on that, where we are, and what kind of ships and stuff we have out there. I know we have a fairly sizable fleet, but is it really prepared? I hope that we are. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I wish we had Cerulean Gray on here, man, who can actually speak to something like this, because he would know a lot about this. Shout out to Cerulean Gray. That's serious business. Yeah, your ships are. Imagine if you had a Speedy or a Jiffy Lube or whatever those places are that change oil on cars and filters and stuff, and you have a bunch of cars that's backed up around the corner, can't get in because you don't have enough oil and enough supplies, enough logistics to actually perform the job that you're supposed to be operating. And what's happening here, I think, is that I would venture a guess that the U.S. Navy is really not prepared for littoral combat at this point. I mean, there's a lot. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, U.S. military has these exclusive weapons of and hardware and stuff like that." But if you can't even get your ships ready, for basic maintenance, annual maintenance, I don't see how all of those toys are going to help you at this point.
Well, I'm looking at a comment from Bullet Tooth Tone, where he says that and I know this militarily, we were supposed to, like in the Second World War, we were able to actually fight, on two fronts. We were able to have an Atlantic and a Pacific fleet, and actually able to kind of defend in the hemisphere. But it seems as though that might be compromised today. So if we got into a major conflict, would we be able to deal in that type of conflict. From his comment, doesn't look like that we would be able to do so. So
Mhm.
I would like to look into that more. But if that is the case, um, that's not a great sound. That doesn't sound that doesn't sound very good. And I know we might be counting on the superiority of our Air Force, but that might like in any force may have
Mhm.
some weaknesses that people can potentially uh, negotiate. So if that's the case,
Mhm.
and we don't have a strong military naval fleet,
Mhm.
we could we could be saying we're more vaunted than we are. And the sounds of this doesn't sound good.
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah,
sound.
yeah, and I think Bullet Two Tone said this is interesting. The Air Force is having similar issues with maintenance, parts, and development. I mean, if the Air Force is having this issue, um, Navy's having this issue. I know Army was having issues getting enough MRAPs into the Middle East because they need, in the beginning of the Iraqi invasion, they were getting picked off with IEDs and whatnot. They're right around those Humvees, nothing but aluminum foil, to kind of secure it. And you know, that's not the business for warfare. If you plan on going to war, um, your ships don't got oil changes. Your Humvees and your armored vehicles don't have any survivability, and your Air Force is lacking parts and logistics, to take off. I mean, we just saw a F-18 Super Hornet crash a couple weeks ago out in California.
Uh, you know, this is my question. I know no one's gonna have an answer to this because there's no one here who will be on the inside to really give a good idea on this. But since we're putting damn near 51 cents of our dollars that we're taking out for your taxes are going to your military,
Mhm.
what are we doing? I mean, if I'm putting that kind of money, let's say into my cars,
Mhm.
into my guns, them shits is cracking like there's no tomorrow. Them shits are cracking. My stuff is tight. Where is where's the money going? We're talking about
Nobody.
dilapidated fleets, unserviced, and all our money is going there. There's this something doesn't sound right.
I think the money is going to someone's pocket. When you think about Lockheed
That's
Martin,
all I'm saying.
yeah, when you think about Lockheed Martin and those stealth LCSs, those littoral combat ships that were supposed to be state of the art, the U.S. Navy ordered 32 of them, and only 4 of them showed up, and they spent almost $40 billion on these things. Where did the 28 warships go? What happened to that order, and why haven't they been fulfilled? So a lot of questions, man. That U.S. Navy is going to have to, or U.S. government is going to have to figure out how do you compensate for this. I mean, what are you going to do? Take it out of the trade war tariffs and fund your operation that way? I don't know.
It sounds like gross incompetence, gross um, you know, economic with respect to the military malfeasance. And I'm sure if we really were to strip the cover off of this, it would look like hell with the lid off. I really would, and I don't know, but the sounds of this sounds insane to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we have many of our people going into the military. Let's talk about our black community, where we have many going into the army. We do have a presence in the Air Force and certainly the Navy as well. Um, we have a lot of our people in our community going to into these services, and are they going into services where they are actually um, um, in an area where or in a branch that's not well supported, and if something does pop off, um, you know, what is the chance? Even though you're designed to go to war, but what are the chances of safety of your loved ones that are there? Are they just cannon fodder for something like that? We have to ask these questions. Certainly if we're paying for this, and this is some of the stuff that's coming out. Very, very disturbing.
My question, shout out to Mike and the Gone. My question then becomes,
What's up, Triz? What's up, baby?
And what's going on? Is it an issue of personnel and supplies? Because the gentleman in the live chat mentioned that there was a number of shipyards closed, and I think part of the rationale could be, from my time in the Army, I didn't deal with ships, but I did have run-ins with motor pools, and motor pools is the automotive equivalent of a shipyard, where the vehicles are housed and maintained and things of that nature. And a lot of times, anybody in the military can attest to that. The motor pool didn't do nothing. Like, if something happened, of course they were there to resolve the issues, but a lot of times the motor pool was spent a lot of their time was idle. They weren't actually doing vehicle repair and maintenance. They were doing inspections and things like that, just to basically busy work. But unless something happened to the vehicle, there were some motor pools, depending on which motor pool you're at, that really didn't do anything. But is it an issue of there not being enough available shipyards, or is it an issue with budget? Because what you said earlier, Mike, was there was an issue with reallocating funds that were already specified for a specific bucket. And so you've taken funds from, say, maybe you're taking funds from from intelligence and then shifting it over into Navy ship maintenance, and so the Congress has put a limit on the amount of money that you can shuffle around. But that seems like those are two different things. Is it an issue of not having enough money, or is it an issue of having the money and not having, logistically not being able to perform the repairs and maintenance?
DE, you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, good morning, good evening, everybody. Sorry about that.
Hey, what's going on? Shalom.
All right. We got the Navy allocates money for ship maintenance. They build ships by class. So if you got, I don't know, 8 carriers, and you're going to take one out of service every year, the problems that you find in that one that you pulled out of service to inspect, you're more than likely going to find in the next one. So if you got one coming in every 6 months, you budget for the inspection of that area that you found something unexpected, so you can look at that. They do that in airplanes. I mean, you might find say for instance, a fault. You might not see it while you're flying, but you might find a fault that you might detect a fault in the navigation system. And then, because since all the airplanes have the same hardware and software, you're going to look for all the airplanes to have the same fault. You're going to at least check to see if they have the same fault. So you allocate funds for that. What's been happening with the Navy is that they're not keeping ships in the dock very long, because the president, he pulled the ship out of the dock and sent it to the Far East to try to contain the Chinese. And when something happened in the Middle East and around the Straits of Hormuz or Iran, they pulled the other one that's coming in, they redirect it there. So the ships are not getting maintenance, they're falling apart. The airplanes on them are not getting maintenance. It's just the maintenance that you get in, because you got an engine on say one of those F-135s or F-16. You can fly that without major maintenance, or you pull it out and inspect it. Say about every 5,000, 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours would be a major inspection, where you check for cracks and everything like that inside all the blades, the fan blades and all that. You have to dedicate money to doing that. And if you're not doing it, if you say, well, you know what, we can pull money, since we don't have enough money to go fight this war in Iran, So we can cut back, we can stretch the hours. Instead of 5,000 hours, we make it 10,000. And instead of 10,000, you make it 15,000. So that's what's happening. And the things are falling apart. I've seen it happen myself. I'm serious. I've seen it happen myself with my own eyes.
So yeah, and it sounds to me like they're stretched pretty thin, because we covered an article before, man, with a lot of including that of John Pilger, coming war on China. 48 accidents over in Okinawa with aircraft and whatnot, helicopters falling out of the sky, and these big ass ospreys, just tipping over on themselves and killing the pilots and everybody else in there. Just all types of
jet planes flying into schools.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because you got to keep them flying. It's that there's something seriously wrong with it. It's like the 737. Boeing knows something wrong with the airplane, but since that's the money maker, so you got to keep it flying. The same thing with the military, and it's more so with the military because you don't have civilians dying. When you have a military guy, if I'm in the military and the airplane that I'm flying on falls out of the sky, they're gonna deliver a letter to my family and says, well, he died in the line of duty. Thank you very much for his service. Next up, find another guy to replace him.
But that's costing them a lot of money, because you invest into a soldier, the money that you invest in training and medical and everything else, all the benefits and whatnot, place of stay, food. I mean, you're investing into these new soldiers, and then next thing you know, they're not even dying in combat, like we saw in Vietnam. We covered we covered an article a few weeks ago. These untold secrets of catastrophes happening on U.S. warships. Fighter jets spilling fuel on the deck and it leaking down below, and ammunition loading.
We're talking about service ships. Nobody is talking about below the waterline, and that's the most dangerous.
Well, you're talking about submarines.
Yep. Below the waterline, that's the most dangerous. The one below the waterline and the one that carry those, like the B1. You don't want something to go wrong with the B1. They fly 52s 24/7. There's always a few of them in the air, loaded and ready to go anywhere.
All right, this is my question.
So you got to look at the submarines, which are carrying the weapons of protection, and that 52 that's carrying the weapons of protection.
ADE. I want to ask you this. What is our true state of readiness? I don't know if you'd be capable of answering that question, but
Super Triz answer that as well.
We are ready. We are ready because we know the next war is a non-survival war. So we are ready. This is different to World War II, where the weapons we had, it threatened country.
I think our next war is not going to go straight nuke. I think it's going to be a heavy conventional situation for quite a while before we even consider doing that. That's what I believe is going to go down.
You hope so. If it happens in some place,
I don't know if I hope so. I think that's what we're planning on, because I believe that this next war will not come out like. So I think it's something that I'm looking at right now that I'm very disturbed about. Is something like what's going on with India and Pakistan right now over Kashmir, and here we are, once again looking at basically three nuclear powers. We're looking at 45% of Kashmir being controlled by India. We're looking at another 35% of Kashmir being controlled by Pakistan, and we're looking at roughly about 20% of Kashmir controlled by China. And I'm looking there, and I could see how just these border skirmishes and so forth can come about. And then next thing you know, you're getting into a conventional situation of which no one really wants. And then others might get in to try to settle it down, but then there might be jump offs in certain other areas, and things could kind of gradually kind of build to something kind of crazy before the real shit pops off. And I'm thinking that that it's going to be a conventional type of deal that's going to suck in a lot of others before it gets to that point. That's what I'm really that's what I'm really seeing. And from our geopolitical perspective, if we've looked at wars really happen, that's kind of how things. That's kind of how things happen.
They won't use nuclear weapons.
No.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
They won't use them.
You know, and I'm saying Kashmir and China, you know, where this is, I don't see them popping a nuke off right there because they're too close, and people will not. It's not really survivable from that perspective. So I see this thing being a lot more. I see stuff popping off in a much more conventional way, and that's really what I'm concerned about. And I think the only time you would get to really that nuclear component is if your defeat is absolutely imminent. And you know,
they would surrender. They would surrender before that, and the reason why they would surrender is because if they were to launch one off, you have no idea where the next one's going to come from, right? India.
You have no idea, but India could suck
India,
China in. I'm just saying India could suck China in, and then you're looking at other borders. You're looking at where Russia might get involved, and then you're looking at also where some other countries that are close in, you know, that might be closer in the region that could be, you know, threatened. You know, could actually move into the Eurasian aspect, a part of the world where we don't know what's getting. Turkey and these other countries. You just don't know how this thing could ultimately begin to spread out. Hold on a second.
Like, let's get Super Triz in there, man. You have any opinion on the combat readiness of the U.S. military?
Well, I mean, the combat readiness is not even a question. They're absolutely combat ready, and you know, just logistically, they would just, you know, they're various. At any given time, there's various operations going on that don't really get a lot of publicity, so they're able to pull back resources and like basically triage and say, okay, we're going to scale back resources in this specific region and focus on this other area, and then also the actual reserve component. So they're actually ready. They're I think they're very ready. I think it's you know, it's there are some issues obviously with maintenance and things like that, but that's because, you know, there's a concern. There's always been a concern about military spending, right? But in an event where people feel as though if they're threatened, they feel endangered, they're not gonna have any problem with allocating additional resources to the military budget. Just that simple. And media will have an amazing effect on sensationalizing the threat and putting people in a fervor, and they'll have no problem. They'll say, listen, take half of my check and send it to the military. We just want to feel safe. That's just the way it is.
Instead of war bonds, they have war cryptos set up. You know, people dumping all their dumping all their money into that. Let me get to this next article. This is from presstv.com. U.S. greater threat to humanity than Nazi Germany. The U.S. under both extremist right wings of its war party is a rogue state by any definition. It operates extrajudicially. Got some feedback. If you're not talking, please mute yourself. It operates extrajudicially at home and abroad. It's increasingly repressive and totalitarian, heading toward full-blown tyranny if the present trend continues unchecked. It's an outlaw state contemptuous of international and constitutional laws, human and civil rights, as well as the welfare of ordinary people everywhere. It repeatedly breaches international treaties and agreements, proving it can never be trusted. Why diplomacy with its ruling authorities accomplishes nothing. Toughness, the only language they understand. It sponsors and proliferates terrorism worldwide, including domestically in inner cities turned into battlegrounds. It's the only nation ever to use weapons of mass destruction in combat. Wherever U.S. forces show up, mass slaughter, vast destruction, and human misery follow. It uses chemical, biological, radiological, and other banned weapons in all of its wars of aggression against non-belligerent states threaten no one. It spends countless trillions of dollars on militarism, maintaining a global empire of bases as platforms for war, waging them endlessly despite facing no enemies or existential threats anywhere. So they are invented to justify what's indisputably unjustifiable. It poses a greater threat to humanity's survival than any other rogue state in history. Nazi Germany lasted 12 years, Stalinist Russia a few decades, Imperial Japan about the same duration. US high crimes of war against humanity have been ongoing for hundreds of years. First against Native Americans, exterminating the vast majority of their numbers, today waging global wars on humanity at home and abroad. In late June, right-wing extremist Trump envoy for regime change in Iran, Brian Hook, warned that nations buying Iranian oil will be unlawfully sanctioned by the US. He falsely accused Tehran of violating maritime law. He falsely called legal Iranian exports illicit. He lied, accusing its ruling authorities of foreign venturism, a long-standing US-dominated NATO specialty, not how the Islamic Republic operates. He turned the truth on its head, accusing Iran of rejecting diplomacy and seeking to dominate the Middle East. Washington's longstanding aim, Israel, as well as its junior partner. Both wings of the US war party are hostile toward all nations the imperial state doesn't control, wanting their ruling authorities replaced by puppet regimes subservient to the US interests. That's what US fury against Iran is all about. Trump regime hardliners more hostile towards the country than their predecessors, Pompeo and Bolton pushing things toward possible belligerent confrontation. On Sunday, Iran's Adrian Daria, one super tanker, formerly Grace One, was freed by Gibraltar authorities to sail towards its intended destination, believed to be uh, Kamalata, Greece, according to the tankertrackers.com. Trump's State Department warned Greece against accepting its cargo, falsely calling the purchase support purchase material supports terrorism a bald-faced lie, bald-faced big lie. The U.S. NATO definition of terrorism applies to the exercise of sovereign rights by all independent states opposed by a hegemonic USA, including the right to have normal relations with other nations, including trade. On Monday, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi warned the Trump regime against seizing or otherwise interfering with the country's Adrian Daria at sea. Should this measure be taken or even spoken of, it would constitute a threat against free shipping, he stressed, adding, necessary warnings were conveyed to the Trump regime not to undertake this wrong-headed action because they will be faced with adverse consequences. I'm not going to read this whole entire thing because I think we get the gist. I don't know if I would make the comparison between the U.S. and Nazi Germany. I think that that's a bit of a stretch. I think that Nazi Germany did not have the similarities in political construct that the United States has today. I don't know what you guys think. All right, I guess nothing. I'll move on to the next one. All right, this one is from Stratford. China Beijing reportedly gives Hong Kong until early September to restore public order, legislators say. The Chinese government is reportedly giving Hong Kong authorities until early September to stabilize its ongoing political crisis, Bloomberg reported August 20th, quoting city legislator Michael Ting. If Hong Kong fails to settle the situation, Ting added, Beijing could directly pressure Chief Executive Carrie Lam, including potentially garrisoning the special administrative region or dispatching armed police. If confirmed, the Chinese government has given Hong Kong a short timeline to restore public order or face potential direct intervention by Beijing if the situation continues to escalate. China is seemingly concerned that ongoing protests will undermine stability in the lead up to the 70th anniversary of the founding of the communist state and has already mobilized armed police forces along the border with Hong Kong. However, a direct intervention would significantly damage Beijing's relation with Hong Kong and the city businesses environment. The latest round of protests in Hong Kong remained relatively peaceful during the weekend, providing a window of opportunity for the city's leadership to diffuse some tensions with demonstrators. Lam has also vowed to foster communication with anti-government protesters and resolve differences. This is interesting because if Hong Kong can't control its people, then China will have no choice but to step in. But if China does step in, they would have to occupy that place for quite some time. It's not going to be easy occupation because the ability to do business as a business clearinghouse as it is won't be easy. They'll lose money day in and day out because no one will want to go to work, or there could be some form of martial law installed inside Hong Kong. But to give them an ultimatum, knowing that they can never fulfill it, just gives them all the justification to go in there anyways. I don't know if anybody else has an opinion about that.
China is not a nation. The leadership of China, mainland China, don't normally take brash action. They will allow certain things to happen if it is not, like Hong Kong, for instance. They know the world is looking at Hong Kong, so they're gonna try to let the leadership in Hong Kong deal with the situation up to a certain point. When it started getting violent, like up to last week, the Chinese came out and said, "Look, we're not going to tolerate this happening." And from the time the Chinese leadership, people in Beijing says, "We're not going to tolerate this," guess what happened? The violence went away. People are now protesting quietly. All the occupational forces, like the airport and the city government and all that, they got out of this. So China is not the nation that they're going to start shouting. No, none of the Communist Party members are going to be like, say, members of Congress calling for the police to go in and do that. It doesn't happen. Everything happens quietly, and then the leadership comes up with one voice and says, "This is not going to happen anymore. This has to stop now." And as you can see in Hong Kong, they're protesting, and China doesn't say, "Okay, you protest as long as Hong Kong is peaceful, you're making money, no problem."
All right, let's get to Strap 4 again. This one is from Strap 4. Russia, Moscow to strengthen military presence in eastern region, defense minister says. Russia will form a mixed air division and anti-aircraft missile brigade in the country's eastern military district, according to the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. TASS reported August 21st. Shoigu accused the United States of attempting to expand its influence in the Asia Pacific and undermining Russian and Chinese positions in Southeast Asia. Shogoi's comments come as the United States is planning to increase its military footprint in the Western Pacific following the collapse of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) treaty, an act that would most likely trigger a Russian response. With Moscow increasing its military cooperation with Beijing, a more substantial U.S. security presence will drive China and Russia to explore additional areas of coordination. On August 5th, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei uh, Rybakov said Moscow would take measures to defend itself if the United States deploys missiles to the Asian theater. I don't know. Seems like a gutsy move on their behalf. I mean, but you would have to know that Russia and China would respond to, missiles in their backyard. I mean, the United States responded to Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were damn near ready to invade that island. Although I thought that was a suicide mission back then, because even if you did invade the island, they would still get those missiles off. It only took 5 minutes to actually go to launch, go from zero to launch. So 5 minutes in an invasion that takes hours to actually sail your ships down there, that would have been a suicide mission for them anyways. I don't know. I think the United States is playing a very interesting game. They already have the THAAD systems and the Aegis systems in place, both in Poland and South Korea, and I think Okinawa too. So what's to say that they're going to add more missiles, but for what exactly? I mean, they already have these countries surrounded. As we saw in John Pilger's The Coming War on China, China is completely surrounded by U.S. Bases and artillery. I mean, this isn't new. This goes all the way back to the 1950s and the 1960s. In the documentary, they talk about a false alarm being set off, and they were a few seconds away from actually firing off missiles into China. And these were nuclear missiles, so I don't see how much of that actually changed from then to now.
Well, I don't know. My opinion is that the U.S. has planned to get out of the treaty. It was only now that Trump is in office. Trump just happened to be, I think Obama kicked it down the road. Let Trump deal with it. Let the Republicans deal with it. Whoever, they kept kicking the ball until Trump came along. And then it came to decision time and Trump had to make a decision. But to stay out of the treaty is something that they plan. This is not something that's taken lightly. All the congressmen that involved in military affairs and all that had to be briefed. Everybody was on board with it. Otherwise, it couldn't happen. And they had to have the military contractors ready to go to test. What they're doing now, I think, is probably testing all the old missiles that they had nuclear warheads on. They're checking in to see if the missile is still capable of delivering. Maybe they're going to go in and fix the navigation systems, and they probably put new warheads on there. And then a few years from now, they're going to start negotiating for another treaty. They're just, in my mind, they're upgrading the system. They're using this to upgrade the systems. And Russians have to do the same thing. If Russians don't do the same thing, they're going to get caught. If the Chinese don't do the same thing, they're going to get caught. And China's saying, don't get us involved in it, because China don't want to get involved in any nuclear treaty with the US. Because China is saying, hey, you're surrounding us, and we never had the opportunity to build our forces to the point to defend ourselves from attack from you. So we're not going to join any treaty that you are involved in. And the Chinese leadership, that's a good idea, you know.
Right. That's a good point because they were largely left out of the whole entire discussion because they were on the side of Nixon at the time.
Right.
This was all happening, and now that they've kind of flipped the script, they're pretty much in a non-aligned state with the United States. So their missiles don't even comply with the INF anyway. So they're looking at this and saying, well, what you know, where this doesn't apply to us, whereas the United States is saying we need to scrap this deal and have a new one because China, India, Pakistan, all of them have missiles that have range, including Iran too. Iran, they all have the capabilities to reach most U.S. military bases, regardless of where they are, and as well as their aircraft carriers. Um, even North Korea. North Korea does not comply with the INF because they were never a part of it. When this stuff was written, they were largely back to the Stone Age. If you look at North Korea back then, I mean, United States bombed the country until there was nothing left.
This is yes, they'll come back to the negotiation table, but why they want to get China involved so they can limit China's capacity.
China's going to tell them to go screw.
Say the United States got 15,000 nukes, and the Russians got 12,000, and the Russians say, okay, we know our 12,000 is capable of doing what we want to do. The U.S. is saying we know, and the Chinese only got 2,000. You think the Chinese going to say our 2,000 are good enough? No, we want 12,000 too. And the U.S. going to bring them in and say, look, since you and the Russians are on the same side, you guys got enough missiles or enough weapons already.
Don't think that Russia is not looking at China sideways too, saying, don't try to get cute with us. So,
because look at what happened with the Russia and the Chinese were together before 1971 when Nixon went over there and took the Chinese out of the Russian
sphere of influence.
Yeah. So the Russians have to.
Because it was Russia that would actually bailed out North Korea from the Korean War. And
all the weapons,
and they largely actually helped the Chinese get the Japanese off of their back too. So Russia played a very strategic role in the stability of the region. They would be crazy to have China sign on or North Korea sign on. You would have to have everybody sign on because everybody has intermediary missile capabilities. Everybody has them now. I don't care who it is. Even Yemen, with all their missiles, most of their missiles would be compliant with intermediary agreements because they have a lot of Scud missiles that they left over from the Soviet era that can actually reach great portions within the Middle East. I mean, we saw earlier today they took out Saudi Arabia's a major portion of Saudi Arabia with a missile.
Yeah, I had to step off for a second, fellas. I just missed a little bit. Maybe you can catch me up real quick for a quick second here.
We were talking about Russia beefing up their eastern district, eastern region with the Pacific, because the INF agreement has been suspended early in the month, and that U.S. is putting these missiles inside the Pacific region of Russia and China, which would be the eastern region of their area, and that those missiles, and that the purpose of putting those missiles there is to put pressure on China so that they come to the table and negotiate. Because when the treaty was established, China did not have any of these capabilities, but now China has these capabilities and they're non-aligned with the United States. This puts them at odds with the United States just based off of that and that alone.
Hey, I don't know if you guys saw the articles,
right.
South China Morning Post and all that. Everybody's like, the thing between Japan and Korea, a lot of people are now jumping in on Japan and saying, hey, look, you're an Asian country. Why is it you're siding with the US? You're going to have to make friends in Asia.
Well, that's what Putin told Abe earlier this year. Abe told Putin that they should give back the islands that were captured during World War II. He says, "Well, you're telling us this, but you're not telling the United States, who's occupying Okinawa, that they should give you back your islands. So who are you to tell us that we should give you back some islands that are, you lost those during the war. So you can't ask for something back after that, but you're not asking the United States to give back your island.
Right.
So, Putin plays a strong hand. Speaking of Russia, let's talk about the Africa report. Russia, Africa, Putin's continental strategy. From October 22nd to 24th, the Russian city of Sochi on the Black Sea coast will host the first ever Russia-Africa summit, when Morocco's King Mohammed VI offered Vladimir Putin milk and dates as a welcome gift. Back in September 2006, the North African ruler knew that the event was exceptional in more ways than one. Not only was this the first visit of a Russian president to Morocco since the fall of the Soviet Union. Oh, sorry, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, in 1991. The last one had been by Leonid Brezhnev in 1961. But the man with the light hair and opaque eyes that Mohammed VI received with high honors had rarely set foot in an African country, except for the Algeria 6 months earlier, in Egypt the previous year. Putin has since visited Libya 2008, Egypt 2015 and 2017, but the only other country in sub-Saharan Africa the Russian president has visited is South Africa. This shows how little interest he has in the south of the continent, at least on a personal level. And yet, it was in Johannesburg in July 2018 during the BRICS summit, a bloc of 5 emerging countries meant to counterbalance the West, that Putin launched his big idea to organize a Russia-Africa summit. It will be a first in the history of his country. Long faded are the memories from the 1970s of the relations that united a continent in the process of decolonization, while the USSR pursued its campaign of third world solidarity. From October 22nd to 24th, Sochi will host this major diplomatic event, which will be preceded by a business forum. Because of its Mediterranean climate, the city was once a haven for tuberculosis patients, including playwright Anton Chekhov, who nursed their hopes of recovery under Sochi's palm trees. It is also famous for the sulfurous waters with the anti-rheumatic properties in which Stalin dipped his clubfoot. It was here that his entire court, terrified, was ordered to accompany him on holiday. Completely redesigned for the 2014 Olympic Winter Games, for better or for worse, it is undergoing a new facelift of its infrastructure and conference and centers in preparation for the event. The governor of Krasnodar and the Rus Congress Foundation, which are responsible for the logistics of the Russia-African Summit, are expecting no less than 10,000 people, including thousands of business people. 35 countries have already confirmed their participation, and many African leaders will be in attendance. Among those announced are Angola's president, South Africa's president, Cote d'Ivoire's president, Mali's president, DRC president, Madagascar, and Egypt's president, who is in the capacity as president of the African Union, will be master of ceremonies alongside Putin. The former KGB colonel and Cairo field marshal appreciate each other. Putin has never criticized the way al-Sisi came to power and punished his opponents. According to Mikhail Bogdanov, Putin's special envoy for the Middle East and Africa, the enthusiasm is such that this summit will take place every 2 or 3 years going forward. He and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have spared no effort increasing their travel on the continent since the beginning of the year to prepare the diplomatic and commercial ground. Borgadov traveled to Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Central African Republic, and Sudan, where relations are to be rebuilt after Omar al-Bashir was overthrown. He was also at the inaugurations of both Rojolina and Mauritania's Mohammed Old Ghazano. Lavrov toured the Maghreb and was received by Mohammed VI. I'm not going to read this whole entire thing. This is really long. But Russia does have a Russia has been talking about doing this for quite some time, and as it stands, they've had good relations with the continent because they help with decolonialization through political and military logistics. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of all this, because this is going to be a game changer. This will determine who Africa really sides with, because you can't have all of these global powers as your friends and not think that they're not going. This is not going to lead to a conflict at some point.
Well, the question then becomes, will this create a division within Africa? Because we already know Africa's disjointed as it is. It's not like it's, despite the African Union, Africa is not one monolith. You have various different ideologies, even within specific countries. Mm-hmm. You have conflicting opinions on the actual direction that specific country should go, let alone the continent as a whole. So if Russia is like serious and actually follows up and follows through with their their version of diplomacy, and now entities within Africa will have to actually pick sides and cause division and say, okay, well, this is like the people who are kind of rocking with Russia. These are the people that are rocking with China, and these are the people that are rocking with the United States, or these are people that are rocking with whatever other country that has a vested interest within the continent. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how that pans out. But at any rate, I have to cut out of here kind of early because I gotta, I'm still working tonight. So right. Thank you guys for having me, and it was a pleasure.
Hey, no problem, man. Have a good night.
All right, peace.
Good night, man. Good night, Tris.
Good night, Tris.
Yeah, I think the African nations should look strictly at what their interests are and play everyone. Play everybody. Don't be too committal on really anyone else who's ever coming in. They're helping to benefit the country. That's who you kind of work with, and that's it. The more you play it that way, the less you'll have a chance of having what I would say, setting yourself up for proxy wars and that type of situation. You don't want that. So you want to play everybody and kind of work with everyone. That's going to work towards your interests and make sure that you are in control and handle that, as opposed to committing to any one of these people and thinking they're going to have your best interest at heart, because that has not been the case historically. So I'm playing everybody, the African Union is sticking together from the standpoint as a union to develop each nation to be able to function and increase its wealth, decrease poverty, ignorance, and disease, increase wealth, prosperity, and upward mobility of its population, and work with everyone there. And anyone who comes off sideways and funky and tries to play it a little bit different, you cut their ass off and you keep it moving. As well as with the interest of your country to develop it. Don't get a brain drain. Try to develop a community, if you will, where you're creating jobs inside of your country, where you're keeping people who now don't want to leave but want to stay and build. And I think that's what Africa has really got to put its emphasis on. Just looking at what's happened over the last 500 years there, it really needs to really coalesce and work with itself. And from what I'm hearing, countries are some of these nations are kind of looking at it from that perspective. But that's how I would see it. These outsiders, the Chinese, with their very far right-wing aspects that they have there, United States with its rapacious racism, none of them are to be trusted. So you use them. You use them as utilities, as opposed to real allies. And that's how I have to, see that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Russia?
Yeah, I think the Russians are, from what I'm seeing, the Russians are not going in a big way as far as trade is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
They are working with a lot of African governments in building the military. They have these special forces that are in there doing training for the military, and they have to establish a footprint in there to keep an eye on what the Europeans and Americans are doing, what NATO and America is doing, because the Russians basically are working with the Chinese in wherever the Chinese are.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese are there for the resources and the logistics. Belt and Road especially is resources and logistics, and the Russians are there to kind of like, in order say if I'm Kenya, I have to make sure that the logistics work. You understand? And like police and military have to protect and maintain the security. And I see a lot of governments, and whereas the EU will go in there, and like France, for instance, France will keep its colonies. So anytime somebody come in power that wants to change that, they create civil war in the country.
Yep.
If you have a good if you have a focused,
try to destabilize,
right? If you have a focused military, you can't create any kind of separatist force, because the military is going to go and take them out. You understand? So that's what Africa is going to need going forward. You can't let some outside country, like what are you doing in Hong Kong? You got pictures here. You see pictures of the U.S. representatives meeting with the Hong Kong rebels. Not rebels, but protesters.
Allegedly protesters.
So if you allow, like I said, what French do, we don't want the French currency, so we're gonna send people in there to destabilize the country. Then we're gonna send in the French military to pretend that we stabilizing the country. No. You got your own military is strong enough. You can keep that from happening. And that's what Africa needs.
We got 40 people watching and only like 20 likes. Can we please hit the like button if you're not going to participate in the chat? All right, let's get to the next article. This one is from AfricanExponent.com. How colonialism birthed the concept of separatism and civil wars in Africa. Speaking of the devil that DE was referring to, it is not fair to blame all of Africa's problems on colonialism, because we are at fault for refusing to uproot these evil seeds and or attempting to uproot them in the wrong manner. There is no denying that colonialism sowed the seeds that birthed the concept of separatism, which evolves into civil wars. But to allow this seed blossom before our very eyes and continue to water it while its roots continue to rapidly destroy our foundation is entirely our fault and ours alone. The conflict of interest and dual ownership experience in the control and financing of activities in African territories during the colonial era is one of the greatest reasons behind the concept of separatism, which is gaining ground in many African countries. If you're not going to be speaking, please mute your mic. It is given rise to civil wars that further give opportunity to the slave masters to achieve their aim of neocolonialism and imperialism. The issue of multiple controls during the colonial era has affected Africa in no small way. For example, in the early 1880s, the British occupied Egypt, but this was not regarded as a total control, as they had to share financial control with the French until 1904. The face off between the two countries meant that they had to form allies with other rival powers to substantiate their claims. Also, many of the colonial boundaries that emerged after the Berlin Conference group different tribes and people who have no business together to form artificial states. This is one of the underlying reasons to civil wars in the continent today, and the argument brought forward by those who favor the idea of separatism. They claim that tribes and regions should be allowed to disintegrate since these artificial states have gained independence from the colonial masters. Their argument is further back with the claims that these tribes, kingdoms, or regions were independent before colonialization, and if independence has been gained from their common enemy, everyone would be allowed to go his own way. MGTOW. This further goes on to reveal the direct and indirect consequences of colonialism and how it will continue to affect the continent negatively for many years to come. African leaders do not subscribe to the concept of separatism and often prefer the option of a civil war rather than separation. This is because separatism brings instability, and successful separatism succeeds in inspiring others to demand such also, something that threatens the authority of governments. Sounds like a hashtag we've been referring to the last few weeks. African countries are usually composed of different people with relatives in neighboring countries. The success of a few countries like Namibia, and Eritrea in backing up and breaking up has not failed to inspire others, and this has led to increased bloodshed in the continent. The Nigerian Biafra Civil War, 1967 to 1970, appears to be a divisive piece of history that proves that regions are willing to do whatever it takes to gain freedom, and the government of the state is ready to match this ambition with firepower at whatever expense to keep the state together. Despite the unsuccessful attempts of many civil wars, the concept of separatism and decision to fight for it has not reduced. This is the reason for the unnecessary wars in the Congo Democratic Republic, Sudan, Zimbabwe, etc. We cannot continue to give the excuse of colonialism for the disunity, conflict, and wars in our continent today. As a people, we should come together and solve our problems rather than play puppets in the hands of these uh, erstwhile colonial masters who continue to play God in Africa, in the African continent, and move us about like pawns on a chessboard. Only time will tell whether there will not be more successful attempts of separatism in the near future. Either way, we are playing perfectly into the hands of the colonial masters who, like Kwame uh, Kwame said, never left Africa. This is very interesting because separatism and the move to be separate has been proliferated here with these hashtags. We see how they treat people of melanated skin who come from different places just behind a social media movement to be separate but equal at some point. So I get why Africa has these problems, but why have these same problems elsewhere outside of the continent? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
You're looking at something that happened in Europe, and then the Europeans brought it to wherever they went to in the rest of the world. There's always been something that happened in Europe. You know, the countries of Europe, each little village will want to be a fiefdom. You know, if you look at British history, which the British taught us so well in Barbados, you'll see that each you have the Lord of Sussex, you have the Lord of Yorkshire, you know, the Lord of Bristol. And they each fought each other, you know, for control of their land. And then throughout, even up to World War II, you will see how World War One was a good example of this. You see the French and the British, how they divided up Europe. The people, America was included too. I mean, you had little kingdoms created that cross borders, you know, where you have half Russian, half whatever other national involved in this country to keep it destabilized. And that's what they did in the Berlin Conference, just to keep the place destabilized. And if you see what happened after they became independent, these movements, you know, the British will befriend one chief, you know, and me, I'm looking at the DRC right now, and I'm hoping that the DRC doesn't get broken up into 2 or 3 countries, because if they do it, then you have the French, the British, well, the Israelis are the British Israelis, the British people of so-called Jewish descent are in there, and they're the ones who are reaping the diamonds and all the minerals. The British side, and you got the French, who you know, are working in there too, and you got the government who's supposed to be the legitimate government. So you got looking at like 3 different entities fighting over this one country. If they don't get it together, the country's going to get broken up like Sudan. They took the part of Sudan from al-Bashir that kept him in power, and look what happened to al-Bashir. You know, Ethiopia. I don't know if people have been watching the history of Ethiopia. Ethiopia, they killed Haile Selassie.
Yep.
Once they got rid of that, Ethiopia, the country, they began to break up Ethiopia. So and when this guy, the president right now, well, his predecessor, when he started modernizing the country, everybody was complaining, and they were even trying to get Egypt to go to war against Ethiopia over the Nile.
Yeah, that was Mohammed Morsi.
Yeah. So you can see that they're still at work. Even in South Africa, people look at South Africa and they see the things that are going on, and you see the red shirts. I call them red shirts. I know what I'm talking about. But you see that these guys are working to solidify the country. And you got people in there, the Israelis in there, they are training the monsters who created the apartheid state. They are training them to create an army. And people are not complaining about that.
You're referring to the economic freedom fighters.
Well,
Julius Malema.
well, yeah. But what I'm saying, I'm not talking. The Israeli army got people in South Africa training white settlers,
Oh yeah.
the former apartheid people,
Yep.
creating their own army.
You have people from the United States. You know, these white militias actually going over there
Doing
back
that.
and forth
Yes.
to help out.
So we gotta have Africa. They're gonna have to. They never had real strong military. There are only a few countries like Egypt. Well, Morocco to some extent. Egypt, Ethiopia has got a pretty good army.
Algeria.
Yeah, Algeria, Nigeria to some extent before.
Libya had one.
Yep. So
and that's probably one of the most advanced nations in Africa.
Yeah.
Before Gaddafi's downfall.
But you gotta have a strong military to protect your country. You can't let the French bring in there, start like Al Qaeda. What Al Qaeda doing in Africa? They were created. They were created to give the British a reason to go into Kenya and Tanzania, and East Africa.
You mean Al Shabaab?
And the CIA played a big role in creating Al Qaeda.
Oh yes. They call them different names. They call them different names all over the place. But there's one organization connected and given different names to make people think that these are different terrorist groups coming all over the world. It's not. It's just one.
Well, what I'm saying is by name, the marketed name would actually be specific to the region, right? So
right.
If you're referring to East Africa, it would be Al Shabaab.
Al Shabaab, right.
Right. So in West Africa, it would be something different, right? But Gaddafi kept the northern part of Africa pretty safe because his military kept the region clear of all the terrorists. Whatever terrorists were available in his country, he put them in jail. So he did a pretty good job at keeping the region secure, and he's the only one in Africa to take on the U.S. military under Reagan. He had his MiG fighter jets going toe to toe with those F-14 Tomcats.
Yeah, which was not that great of a plane. The Tomcats wasn't that great of a dogfighter, if you will.
Right.
Oh yeah.
They tried to make it like that, but it was really more of a swing wing bomber in more respects than a dogfighter. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. But
all right.
You guys can hear me?
Oh, what's going on,
Yep.
dude?
Hold on. Time for I'm working this. You hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Yeah. So peace, brothers. Peace to the brothers.
Hey, what's up, brother Charles? How you doing, man? I haven't heard you in a long time.
Yeah,
Brother
I know.
Charles, what's going on?
Yeah,
I've I'm not, man. I will live. I've been building, man. So I'm pretty much good right now. But
sound like you gained some weight over there.
Nah. It's just been trying to get on this plant-based diet, man. Trying to be like you, Mike.
Oh
You
yeah.
know what I mean, yeah, yeah. But
yeah, go ahead.
Huh? Now I was gonna say, okay. I understand what you're saying. I'm thinking about the article. What I've been researching lately was like the whole Bosnian War, right? And they were one unified front, but everybody wanted, you see a lot more nationalism start popping up, and people start wanting to divide, and people want to go their own way, right? And I noticed with Africa, it's kind of like it should be all one unified front, but everybody has their own identity. It's like more of these nationalistic parties are popping up. They feel like, it should be more about the people, right? But the issue with that when you have parties like that pop up, I've noticed is that it tend to get a little more violent. There's a lot more issues arise from certain situations like that. So it's like one about Africa is like, all right, it is a good thing, but sometimes it can become a bad thing because of certain views. So my question to you, brothers, is like, for it to work, right? For us, anything's going on with with Africa, you think it's going to need one unified front? Like, like everybody has to work on the same page, of course, but like a lot of these nationalistic parties, they kind of like see things their own way. It's like they can't come together, right, and become one. So what do you think is going to take to resolve this, to eradicate this problem, man? Because
I
it's
think
a huge issue.
I think the article is a bit of a stretch. It
Okay.
talks about it from the ground level, but it doesn't talk about the geopolitical aspect of the United States of Africa, right? So they've already signed the agreement earlier this year to actually ratify this whole entire process. So that's already taken place. But I think the article is pointing to these warring factions on the ground from these different tribes, from these artificial states that, that the article is right that the states are artificial, but you still have to respect the boundaries of the states, or else you don't have a country at all. Africa can never be anything like Australia, because it's too vast, and it's too many differences in cultural and political viewpoints. It would be possible to stabilize it in the same way Australia is. But to answer your question, how you would go about it, you have to have a quid pro quo. Who benefits on either side? How does South Africa do business with, let's say, Egypt? How does Algeria pump energy into sub-Saharan Africa in order to reduce the moment blackouts because they have enough electricity, right? So what I'm saying is that there has to be, everyone has to benefit from this. It can't be a one-way relationship in terms of a diplomatic process. Everyone,
I can tell you one way: if you had a unifying currency.
There you go. Is that what Gaddafi was trying to do?
That's what Gaddafi tried to do when they tore his ass out the frame. Mm-hmm. But why did they tear him out the frame? Why did they destroy their country? Because they understood what that meant. That meant it was going to cut out the Europeans, cut out them rapacious frogs, cut their French babbling asses out of there, and then quickly move to unifying the nation, or let's say, the continent, not the nation, but the continent, behind a unified currency where each country, even though they did have maybe different languages and so forth, they have a unified currency so that can easily promote trade, development, and so forth from one nation to the next. A unifying currency would play a very key role in that. That's why that is exactly why they're trying to stop it. That's why they tore Libya out. And Libya was a perfect nation to get that going. They were very advanced, very high standards of living, and so forth. Things were going very well there. And they tried to destabilize the continent from there. And I think the Chinese and the Russians saw exactly what went on, and I think they're going to try to promote that process to a large extent. Now, that's what I tend to believe. But once again, I'll say a unifying currency would play a key role in that. But anyway,
right now they're working on that because I don't know if you see that the West African nation just formed their own currency. The East African nation is forming their own currency, and all you need is the North and South. There are three legs to this thing: the language, which they just signed a thing to make Swahili the language of all Africa. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, we saw that.
And then the free trade agreement, bringing all African. That's two legs. The third leg was what Nago just said: the currency.
Africa has to be able to defend that currency.
Yep.
They have to be able to defend it, and that's a big problem for them because most of them are not in fighting form. Besides Egypt and South Africa, all the rest of them are not in fighting form at all. And I would argue that.
Well, economically, it would put them together. That would help to promote that process. That's the key. That's why they took out Libya. I mean, you talk all the other stuff around. That was the left. Why did they take them out? Well, we just want to save the French. It was just bigger than this. Keep it, keep it elusive. The francophone countries in play, being that they were going down. It's a bigger piece to that. It was they understood Africa was going to unify itself economically, just like how you have the United States unified economically. Europe in so many respects is unified economically, though they don't have the natural resource game and so forth that Africa does to really, really become a manufacturing superpower. They don't have it like that, but Africa does, and it's a whole other game. That's something that they're gonna be very terrified over the next 150, 200 years, and they're gonna try to do what they can to destroy that, or unless get underneath it, because they're not gonna be able to stop it as time goes on.
Well, the thing is,
Nabon was just saying how the guy from South Africa trade with the guy from Algeria. If you got one currency, you know what? I, as a businessman from Algeria, can go talk to my business partner in South Africa, and he's using the same currency, so I don't have to go through the international monetary markets.
That's exactly right.
That's
exactly right.
Keep in mind that Gaddafi's idea involved a gold-backed currency.
That's exactly what we're talking about. And
the new African currency that they're talking about right now, I don't even think it involves gold. I think it's just more paperback than anything else. So
I think the countries and the nations would come around to look at getting it backed by something very specific, because we see now with the failure of Bretton Woods and all that, and trying to come up with a Bretton Woods 3, if you will, or Bretton Woods 2, excuse me, but may move on to a Bretton Woods 3, of which, coming off of a paperback system without it being backed up by some other type of either some type of gold or sterling or however, you're going to see that's going to be instantaneous inflationary, and it will be exceedingly difficult to keep that afloat. So people are going to look at the fundamentals of the economics, and they're going to agree on a gold-backed currency as well. I believe that is the evolution of that. They already came to that conclusion. Gaddafi and them already came to that conclusion. His son and all of them, they came to that conclusion, some years ago. And that was the terrifying thing about why they felt they had to destroy that, because that was going to be the unifier of Africa. That was going to be the unifier of Africa. Sub-Saharan as well as Northern Africa. They the United States understood they had to get in where that process, and Obama unfortunately signed on to that, which I think is a tremendous. Much as I like the man, that was a tremendous blight on his game. That was a blight. But
they were coming after Gaddafi regardless of
but he should have he should have
he should have never gave his nuclear weapons up, which was a big mistake.
That was a critical mistake.
Big mistake. Should have kept his nuclear weapons and fought it out like the North Koreans did. But the problem with that is again, you had 54 African nations that allowed NATO to come in and single-handedly take out this guy on his own. Now, what kind of unification do you have there? In terms of a military response, because what happened in Libya should never have happened to begin with. That should have never happened. There should have been. You should have had Nigeria. You should have had Egypt, especially. You should have had Algeria. You should have had all those surrounding countries mount up and actually respond to that whole entire thing. It shouldn't have been on the Russians or the Chinese or anybody else in the Security Council. It should have been Africans alone pushing back European powers, and that would have been the game changer, because that would have told Europe that you have no options here. But for whatever reason, Jacob Zuma has an interview on YouTube talking about this, that he was on his way up there and he had to turn his plane back around because the airspace was cut off because NATO had closed the airspace. So he had to turn his plane back around. So his oldest son,
his name Saiful, what's his name?
Saeed, I think.
Saeed,
I think his name is Saeed. Gaddafi.
He was in jail. They jailed him for a while.
They let him out.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
out now. He's out now, but he has a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics, so he's no dummy himself. He was
Nah,
one of
he
the,
was the one that was talking about the gold back currency.
yeah, he's one of the brains behind it. So
Yeah.
he's no idiot. He's out, and he's actually going to run for president of Libya next year. So it's just a matter of getting some backing. But you know, these are some of the calamities that you know, the Africans are going through right now. Let me jump to this next article. All right, this one is from Stratfor. Syria government airstrike targets Turkish military convoy in Idlib. The Syrian government has targeted a Turkish military convoy in airstrike as it was traveling near the front lines in northern Syria's Idlib province. The BBC reported August 19th. Ankara said the attack killed 3 civilians and injured 12 others. The incident highlights the ongoing risk of clashes between regional powers in Syria as countries increase their involvement at the front lines of the conflict. Turkey and Russia will likely attempt to prevent the conflict from escalating, but further attacks against the Turkish forces raise possibility of retaliatory strikes by Ankara. An advance by Syrian government forces into Idlib is closing in on Turkish military observation posts, raising the risk of clashes between Syrian and Turkish troops. My position is that good for Turkey. You should probably get out of that country while you still can.
I'm in agreement with that. If Syria is going to become a whole country, they have to allow the government to. They can't be having their, like what the U.S. did before is set up little terrorist organizations in different parts of the country, and Turkey can't do that in Syria. You know, the government has to regain the whole country.
Yeah, and the thing is, Turkey wants to go after allegedly these Kurdish militias. But the thing is, those Kurdish militias are citizens of Syria. So you're talking about killing Syrian citizens of Syria under the guise that they are terrorists, when in reality, um, you're attacking the civilians, what's considered to be civilians, it should be considered civilians, under international law. Like, that's an ethnic cleansing. You're specifically targeting a specific group of people based on an assumption that they are terrorists. Imagine, if you will, if the African Union decided to send warships over to the rural South to take out white nationalists or far right nationalists because they are potential threats to melanated people. I mean, how would the United States or Western powers react to something like that?
Violently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from the ArabWeekly.com. Russia's naval cooperation with Iran complicates Western calculus. Unconfirmed reports said Russia, under the terms of its bilateral agreement, intends to use Iran's Bandar-e-Bashir and Chababar ports as forward military bases for warships and nuclear submarines. Attacks on tankers plying the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil tankers pass, have been attributed by the Trump administration to Iranian naval units, which is ratcheting up its already bellicose rhetoric against Tehran as the Pentagon increases its military presence around Iran. In seeking potential allies to forestall possible Western naval assaults, Iran is looking for solidarity from another country under heavy sanctions from the West, Russia. Iranian Navy Commander Rear Admiral Hossein uh, Qasidi, who was in St. Petersburg July 29th for Russia's Navy Day commemorations, noted that Russia and Iran have signed a naval cooperation agreement that the two countries' navies would have joint maneuvers in the Arabian Gulf, a significant development given rising tensions there.
Oh shit.
This
Oh shit.
this would not be the first bilateral naval cooperation between Iran and Russia. Beginning in 2015, Iran and Russia have had joint naval drills in the Caspian. The Caspian, however, is an inland sea shared by Azerbaijan, Iran, Kazakhstan, Russia, and the Turkmenistan. It is covered by a joint agreement between them prohibiting the presence of foreign military forces there. I don't know why they call it a Caspian Sea. It shouldn't be called a sea at all. In fact, a sea is a body of water that connects to a main ocean, and it does not connect to a main ocean, so it's not a sea.
They've called that the Caspian Sea for a very long time. But let's be very frank about this. You know who they're looking to play this against here, right?
Yeah, in seeking to gather a naval coalition to deploy there, ostensibly to protect merchant shipping, the U.S. government is flying the flag to increase diplomatic pressure on Iran and to isolate it. The Trump administration is pressuring allies, including Germany, France, Belgium, Norway, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, to contribute maritime forces to this coalition. The British government has announced that it was formally joining the U.S. Operation Sentinel maritime mission to protect commercial shipping in the Gulf. Up in the ante, Israel said it would join what the United States calls for an effort to boost security of navigation in the Gulf, leading Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi to say that Iran considers the possible Israeli presence in the U.S.-led coalition in the Gulf as a clear threat to its national security and reserve the right to counter it. 2 days later, on August 11th, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Commander Rear Admiral Al-Azir Al-Riza Tangsiri stated that the United States and Britain bore responsibility for an Israeli presence in raising tensions in the Arabian Gulf, warning any kind of presence of the Zionist regime in the Arabian Gulf is illegal as it may trigger war and conflict in the region. Adding another level of complexity to this rapidly evolving situation, unconfirmed reports that state that Russia, under the terms of a bilateral agreement, intends to use Iran's Bandar-e-Bashir and Chababar ports as forward military bases for warships and nuclear submarines to be guarded by hundreds of special forces military advisors. As maritime tensions intensify between Iran, the United States, and Great Britain, the presence of Russian maritime forces there would constitute a significant check on potential offensive Western naval operations, providing Iran with a significant Navy ally. While in the past, the Russian Navy has sent warships to the Indian Ocean to participate in anti-piracy operations off Somalia, this planned deployment represents a significant development in one of the most volatile maritime zones because it could provide a counterweight to the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet home ported in Bahrain. Further, seeking additional regional allies, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani had telephone conversations with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, and Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad, assuring them that security in the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman is a fundamental foreign policy objective of Iran. On the diplomatic front, Russia has sent UN Security Council members a draft document regarding collective security in the Arabian Gulf at preventing armed conflicts. It is an open secret in Washington that many Trump administration officials, led by National Security Advisor John Bolton, are actively promoting regime change in Iran, while Russian President Vladimir Putin has steadfastly maintained his position to such Washington-inspired color revolutions. Given US President Donald Trump's closeness to the Russian president, it remains unclear whose advice Trump will consider most closely when shaping his administration's policies in one of the most volatile regions in the world. Regarding the July 29th agreement, uh, Kazadi said this is a turning point in relations of Tehran and Moscow in the field of defense. While Washington could counter the rising Iranian Russian rapprochement by softening US policy towards Iran, returning to the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear agreement, easing and eventually lifting sanctions and fostering Arab Iranian reconciliation across the Gulf, reducing tensions and thereby limiting Russia's ability to expand its regional presence, such as moderate policy shifts, seems unlikely given the ascendancy of foreign policy headliners in the Trump administration. In the interim, as Washington prevaricates supports for Iran's position grows, on August 14th, Iraq's Sumaria News reported that the Iraqi government was drafting a proposal for neighboring Arab countries to secure navigation in the Gulf and prevent the entry of outside military forces. Baghdad's efforts underline that many Middle Eastern countries apparently prefer regional efforts to resolve conflict more than solutions imposed by foreign military force, whatever Washington's hawks might wish. I don't know. You have Iranian coastal batteries that can take out most combat ships in the Persian Gulf, and then you tack that on with Russian Navy submarines and destroyers sitting over there. I would probably think twice about going inside, going to war with Iran at that point.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is Russia also protecting its energy game, oil and all that, so they gotta roll with Iran. That they are definitely partners there. You got to give to Putin. He totally outmaneuvered Trump in so many ways. Talk nice to him, had him all talking all sweet about him, and he's getting outmaneuvered by this dude. Putin is a much better political strategic operative than the orange one, and this is a serious check. This is a serious check on Israel. Putting a check on these dudes. Like, all right, y'all gonna come cold swagger in here? Okay, it is. This is where this is what's up. So they are putting up they're putting up their game right now. They're letting people know exactly what time it is. So this is going to force a lot more negotiations than people saber rattling talking about war, especially in that region. I don't know if we can gain military superiority there. It's going to be difficult. Iron domes and all. It's going to be difficult. Israel, I suggest they back off and chill. This is getting ready to get live. They're letting you know exactly how these guys are getting ready to move. If stuff pops off, it's really just that simple. We can look at all the different complex aspects about it, but simplifying this is what we're looking at. DE, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't think Israel has any right in there at all.
Say that again.
I don't think Israel should be there.
No. They're letting Israel know, nah, bro, it's not gonna be like that. Y'all.
Well, Israel's already there, so it's not a matter of whether or not they should be there. They're already there. They already have 2 air bases in Saudi Arabia and, if I remember correctly, in Oman. So
okay, are they going to be able to launch and press war?
They've already done that. Okay. Remember they struck.
So what's your next step? So what's Israel's next step in this? With Moscow and them stepping up like this, what's the next step in this? What's their deal? How are they going to play this?
they themselves won't do anything in terms of
Okay, that's what
full scale attack. What they'll do is they'll push Britain and the United States to actually go in there on their own. Now, whether or not U.S. soldiers actually capitulate to something like this, I don't know. I've heard mixed mixed bag of nuts coming out of these sectors that a lot of U.S. soldiers are not really feeling that whole entire people with little hats on their heads telling them what to do, man, while they got a helmet on. So, um, fighting on their behalf, I don't think they really like that too much. So what I'm
Yeah,
saying here is that
this ultimately is a check on Israel. It's a check on once again. It's a check on Israel. Checking that ass, and
Right.
and the United States is going to have to sit down and say, well, is this going to be a worthwhile move for us here? And it's looking like, let's put it like this: Iran and this whole game, they're looking a little bit stronger every day, and it looks like we're going to have to do some negotiations, as opposed to in the old days of may he rest in peace, John McCain, bomb, Iran, bomb. No, I don't think so. Don't think that's going down. Anyway, go ahead.
Keep in mind that China also plays a role in this as well. If I remember correctly, they are building a naval port on the backside of Iran in Pakistan, which is only about a half hour away. So they have both of the time zones covered in terms of Iran and the Persian Gulf and the that part of the ocean.
And remember, China also has a part of Kashmir. Okay.
Yeah, China also has a huge.
So they're in Pakistan.
China also has it.
So let's keep it real. Of course, China is a very big player in this piece. Anyway, go ahead, D. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One of the biggest bases China have outside of China is in Djibouti.
Yep.
And so you got the Chinese on one side, and now with the Israelis, you got the Russians moving in to. I don't know if you guys remember, Russia took out the whole nav system, or jammed the whole nav system all the way up to, was it Turkey? And Israel couldn't get any airplanes out of the air.
Yeah, they did that twice. They did that twice. They did it in the Mediterranean and they did it in the Black Sea.
Yeah.
And that was both this year.
Right. They Russians are there as like a check. I agree with the going on that part.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a check. That's clear. That's clear as day.
All right, let me get to this next one. This one is from the Jerusalem Post. Russia, U.S. agree Israel can strike Iranian targets in Iraq. Report. Israel has struck Iranian targets in Iraq at least 3 times over the past few weeks after Russia and the United States gave them the green light. The London-based Ashaq al-Sat reported on Wednesday. According to Western sources, Moscow and Washington have agreed that Israel strikes in Iraq and Syria are vital to ensure Israeli security, and that Israel should be allowed to continue tracking Iranian activity in Syria and Iraq and strike Iranian targets that could pose a threat to Israel, such as a long-range and precision missiles. Israel has warned repeatedly that it will not allow an Iranian presence in Syria and has admitted to carrying out hundreds of strikes preventing the transfer of advanced weapons to Hezbollah that included surface-to-air missile kits. On Tuesday, explosions rocked an arms depot belonging to the Popular Mobilization Forces (PMF) near Balad Air Base, some 80 kilometers north of Iraqi capital Baghdad. The PMF, Popular Mobilization Forces, militias incorporated into Iraq security apparatus in 2016 to fight against Islamic State. What the hell just happened? What was that? My page just refreshed on me, so sorry I lost my place. According to a report according to a report from Al Arabia, the target of the strikes were missiles which had been recently transferred to Iraq. Sky News Arabia reported that at least 50 missiles were destroyed in the strike. Last week, a strike targeted another munitions depot southwest of Baghdad that belonged to the Iranian-backed Shia militias, killing one civilian and injuring 13 others. An assessment by ImageSat International released last week stated that the warehouse, which measured 140 by 180 meters, belonged to the Ashad al Shabi or Shabai Popular Mobilization Militia, was located in Iraqi al-Sakir military base. The main building is destroyed with significant collateral damage signs, ISI said, adding that based on the observed damage characteristics in this image, it is probable that the blast was caused by an airstrike followed by secondary explosions of the explosives stored in the place. Last month, an explosion rocked another military base in Amirli in Iraq's northern province, killing 2 people. Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi banned authorized flights last week and ordered all military bases and munition warehouses to be moved away from cities in response to the alleged airstrikes. He also ordered an investigation into the strikes. Israeli officials have warned that Iran is attempting to entrench itself in Iraq, a mainly Shiite country, as it did in Syria, where it has established and consolidated a parallel security structure. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hinted at Israel's role in the strike, saying that Iran has no immunity anywhere. In September, Reuters reported that Iran had transferred ballistic missiles to Shia proxies in Iraq over the course of several months, and that it is developing the capacity to build more there. The missiles that were said to have been transferred include the Fatah 110, the Zulfikar, and Zazal types, which have ranges of 200 to 700 kilometers, allowing them to threaten both Saudi Arabia and Israel. Interesting. I want to actually take a look at these missiles because I think they may be interesting. Let me see. Share my screen real quick. So this looks like the Fatah 110 missile here. Looks like they've been working on this for quite some time, based on the age of the videos. And I would probably say that these are probably S-200 missiles converted into offensive weapons. S-200 missiles are usually air defense missiles, but it looks like they swapped out the warheads and added something more lethal. I would probably also venture a guess that these are yeah, here it goes right here. Iran has a pretty highly skilled demographic of people, so it probably wouldn't take much to actually reverse engineer and create something that's going to be able to launch those missiles if they were once used for air defense capabilities.
And they're on a mobile platform, am I correct?
Yeah, back of a back of a pickup truck.
Talking about Israel. Israel.
They look highly effective.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, they used the Fatah 110 about a year or so ago. They launched from the top of Tehran, the top of Iran, all the way into the northern part of Syria to hit the Kurds. No, it wasn't. It wasn't the top of Syria. It was the top of Iraq. So it shows that Iran has the capabilities of reaching long distances with these missiles. And they said it was accurate too.
Yeah, they're looking highly effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty serious. They look highly problematic.
Yeah, I'd be worried too.
Yeah.
But you know, they have a right to defend themselves.
Damn right.
I mean, what's the point in having an educated population of people if they're not going to be able to put their education to use?
These look very effective. They look like they could be they look like they could be a problem for any opponent. They look problematic. That looks problematic right there.
They transferred some of these to Hezbollah in Lebanon, so keep that in mind that Hezbollah already has these.
Well, we saw with the Lebanese, you know, with a rather arrogant Israeli, proxy force coming in there acting like they were going to come in there and start slapping folks up. They kind of got embarrassed a little bit. So I don't know. Like I'm saying, I think the game might change a little bit over there. I don't know how this symmetrical asymmetrical warfare will really look if this thing really pops off. I don't think we can really easily predict this. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Those missiles are fucking dangerous. Pardon my expression. It's not a game.
Well, you know, they're Soviet-made missiles. That's for damn sure. But the thing is, people look at Iran and say, "Oh, you know, they don't have any capabilities at all." Well, I don't know. Based on this video, I would say otherwise.
For sure, they're problematic.
Yeah, I would not want to get hit by any one of those missiles. I don't care where you are and when they were made. Missiles hurt. Bullets hurt.
Definitely not. And if they're on a mobile platform like that, where you really can't track them as well as you want, and they can just come pickling off at you at any point, I don't know. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, allegedly Syria has a couple of these in their arsenal. They just haven't used them, or maybe they just don't have a launch vehicle for them. But they supposedly have them, which is what Israel seems to be going to look for inside Syria. These are actually, I don't know if they're nuclear capable, but I would probably venture a guess that they are highly.
I would think you could put highly butter laid. Yeah, I think yeah, to say the least, I think they are highly butter laid, and I do believe you could probably tip these with with something nuclear, or at least something what I would consider subcritical. So I maybe not a total nuke, but something that could operate very close to it. So I don't. Problematic right there. That's a problem.
It would more than likely be something like something like high end TNT packed inside that thing, cause some serious destruction. All right, let me get to this next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jay Charles was trying to say something before, but
oh yeah, I was just trying to say, just looking at through the past and looking at Israel's behavior and things they've done. I wouldn't be surprised if they were just to strike anyway, just to see what happens.
Strike who?
Iran.
No, they wouldn't do it.
You don't think so?
They won't have the ability to return back. I mean, you have to remember that Iran is so far away from Israel that they would have to. It's a one-way trip for them. Even if you do have drop tanks, maybe DE can speak more to that. even if you have drop tanks, you can only go so far. You can go to Iran, but you're not coming back. That's for damn sure. Keep in mind that when they struck Iraq in 1986 or 1985,
Yeah, when they flew in there, bombed them. Yeah,
those F-15s were supposed to go to Iran, but because of the revolution in '79, they never received them. So those are brand new, fresh fighter jets, and they had drop tanks with them, and they flew from Israel all the way into Iraq undetected. And by the time they were detected, it was too late. They already took off. They flew as low as 500 feet to the ground, which is significantly low for a fighter jet to fly.
Well, they were flying nap of the earth to avoid. That's what the tornadoes and all them were designed to do, the British tornadoes and so forth. So they fly what's called nap of the earth, and that's 300 to 500 feet, which is nothing high. That's low, and they're trying to even move at almost almost supersonic speed. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous flight path, but it's very effective because it's hard for you to be detected. But flying nap of the earth is about as is about as dangerous as it gets. But that's what they were flying. Yeah, So
yeah, and that's what
happened.
They took out Saddam's nuclear facility after he already paid for it from the French, and the French were in on the whole entire thing. They got the money from Iraq. The Israelis got their strike on, and it all went well for both of the colonialist powers, the European pale-faced powers.
Yeah,
and
they
Saddam
got
was
paid and they destroyed them.
Yeah, let me get to this next article from the nationalinterest.org. How Iran is taking advantage of a weak Royal Navy. What's going on here?
Kind of what we were talking about before, but anyway, go ahead. That's a good one.
Yeah, my connection just dropped. So give me a second. Try this one more time. All right, this one is from nationalinterest.org. How Iran is taking advantage of a weak Royal Navy. Our European partners are now showing some interest in pooling resources to conduct patrols in the strategic waters of in the Gulf region, but they are still trying to pressure the Trump administration into easing up on targeted sanctions against the regime and help Iran find ways to circumvent those sanctions. In doing so, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom are only further incentivizing Iranian aggression. Great Britain once had a marvelous navy, its warships boasting names like Courageous, Dauntless, Indefeatable, and Ultimatum. Her fleets were more than a source of national pride. They manifested a physical assurance that Britain had the ability to see to its national interests. In the early 1980s, not too long after Margaret Thatcher became prime minister, the Royal Navy sailed 64 surface combatants and 16 submarines. Today, the British fleet has dwindled to a mere 19 surface ships, half of which are in maintenance, and only 10 submarines. This is the result of serial underinvestment in defense, a condition witnessed throughout most of Europe, even in the United States. The consequence of this underinvestment is that Britain and other Western nations today are minimally able to protect their own interests, with almost no ability to deter bad behavior of the sort we have recently seen in the Gulf from permanently thuggish Iran. Really. In reality, although it sounds harsh, Britain has only itself to blame for the seizure of its oil tankers. It has chosen to become a soft target, as has most of Europe, which encourages bad behavior by those willing to take what they want. Iran's recent attacks on oil tankers would be surprising were it not for its 40-year pattern of problematic behavior enabled, even incentivized by the West's tolerance, apathy, occasional complicity, and self-imposed weakness to do anything about it. Ever since the mullahs seized power in 1979, the odious regime in Tehran has consistently employed violence and the threat of violence to maintain power at home and extend its influence across the Middle East. If they hadn't said Iran, I thought they'd be talking about the United States and what they did to the Black Panthers. Sometimes it acts directly, but more often it leverages surrogates like the terrorist organization Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and even the Sunni Al Qaeda, among others. It has steadfastly worked toward the destruction of Israel. Why is it stuck? Secretly developing a nuclear weapons program in direct violation of non-proliferation treaty it signed in 1970. Redoubled its efforts to develop ever more capable ballistic missiles and trained and supplied militias in Iraq and elsewhere to attack US forces and other perceived enemies of Iran. Hezbollah has tens of thousands of Iranian supplied rockets and missiles. What's going on here? Hezbollah has tens of thousands of Iranian supplied rockets and missiles, a stockpile it uses to rain on Israel. Iran has directly supported Houthi rebels in their effort to gain control of Yemen and enable them to attack Saudi oil infrastructure and civilians. It has helped to secure the equally repugnant Assad regime in Syria. Yeah, this correlates to what we were talking about earlier with the US having a backlog of naval naval warships that can't get service because they're underinvested or don't have enough capacity to actually do something like this. So Britain only has less than 19 warships and less than 10 submarines, and those get rotated yearly. They go out for 3 months and then they come back. So they don't have a whole lot of, you know, bandwidth to actually be playing games in the Persian Gulf. That's which is why they're so hesitant to go in. Like, you know, we remember what happened in the Falklands. They did not do very well there. So, and Margaret Thatcher could be, you know, the finger could be pointed at her.
You finished, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I don't know. The British, the problem is the British, but it wasn't caused by, it's caused by them trying to follow every move that the US made. Every time the US gets into something, the British are there. Or sometimes the British even go ahead and start something on behalf of the US. And all this costs money. You forget that British was one of the staunchest supporters of the Gulf War, the two wars that the US fought in the Gulf. And the US didn't pay for the British to be there. The British people had to pay for that. So guess where the cuts have to come from? They no longer could support while their armies are fighting on the ground and the Air Force in the air. They have no support from the Navy. And if you see well, you brought the article of how the British are now trying to seek Commonwealth nations to support their armies, their military. they're recruiting people from the Commonwealth into their military. Just like how they recruited people before when to rebuild Britain. They're going on the second recruiting biz now. I don't know what's going to happen to those people when it comes time for them to get paid. The British are going to say, hey, we don't have a Commonwealth anymore. We don't have any money to pay you now.
They'll find some they have to pull the cushions out of their couch to find some sterling.
Yeah. So it's the British fault. But this is a propaganda piece. I don't know if it was written by Netanyahu's office and then given to this guy to print, or the Israeli lobby paid him to write it. But this is a propaganda piece. It's just to kind of make, he's using the British as a example because the British got caught with their pants down. You can't, if you follow the US to do stuff like that, they can't seize, they shouldn't be seizing. How come the Germans or the French didn't do it? They said no. And then the British gonna do it. The Spanish said no. The Italians say no. Yeah. And then the British step up and say, yeah, we'll do it. Guess what? You don't have the backing now.
All right, this one is from the AsiaTimes.com. China's new carrier better and can carry more fighters. China's new homemade aircraft carrier, which can house a dozen more fighter jets than its sister ship, the Liaoning, is likely to be in service by the end of this year. The new warship's multiple voyages in the Yellow Sea off the northeastern China this year are an indication that the official christening and commission of the Type 001A carrier are drawing near. It is likely to be in service by the end of the year, if not ready for the big military show on October 1st, the 70th anniversary of the Communist Republic. Despite being ridiculed as a lookalike of the Soviet-built Liaoning, the People's Liberation Army only carrier in service, the new Type 1001A can house a dozen more fighter jets than her sister ship, according to state broadcaster China Central Television. The new ship can carry a total of 36 J-15s and has more powerful four-shaft steam turbines, a revamped hangar layout, as well as a redesigned bridge with a smaller footprint on its deck. Hu Wenming, the president of the state-owned China Shipbuilding Industry Corp, contracted by the military to build the carrier, told CCTV that the Type 001A would be inherently, I'm not sure what's going on with this, would be inherently more advanced than the Liaoning, with a host of new technologies to make up for the deficiencies of the former, in particular with improvements to its powertrain as well as short takeoff and arrested recovery system for fighters. He added that CSIC and PLA technicians were putting the finishing touches to the vessel, ironing out any problems found during the trial voyages. The new vessel retains the Liaoning's ski jump flight deck, and at 315 meters is 10 meters longer. At 70,000 tons, it displaces 11,400 tons more water than the Liaoning. Its more spacious hangar and flight deck can house and service 12 more J-15 carrier-borne fighters and has space for 14 helicopters. Its 2,000 strong crew and pilots can also rest better in quieter, more spacious dormitories, according to Hu. I guess this is the Hilton on water. So this would be the second one. This would be the second aircraft carrier, and they have a third one coming in 2021.
Well, looks like they want to project power and naval power in the region, in their region.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have to have rotating aircraft carriers, right? So one comes out of service, the other one goes back into service.
Goes back again. They got to project. They got to make sure they have a presence out there.
Yeah.
Got to make sure they have a presence. You know?
Yeah, let me get to these last two articles. This one is from RT.com. State Department approves $8 billion sale of F-16s to Taiwan despite Beijing's warning of consequences. Despite extreme objections voiced by Beijing, the State Department has approved the sale of dozens of F-16 fighter planes to Taiwan, openly admitting that the move serves as U.S. economic and national security interests in the region. The approval of the $8 billion.
Oh, they want Taiwan. Oh, they want Taiwan to go to war, huh?
Well, let's finish reading this. The approval of the $8 billion sale by the Defense Security Cooperation Agency came just days after plans to supply 66 fighter jets to Taipei were greenlighted by the White House. In approving the proposed deliveries, the DCPA reasoned that additional arms will help maintain political stability, military balance, and economic progress in the region. The prospects of yet another weapons sale by the Trump administration to Taiwan, which still has to be approved by Congress, drew ire from Beijing, which repeatedly slammed all U.S. attempts to arm the enclave that China considers an integral part of the mainland. Last month, the U.S. Department of State already approved $2.2 billion arms package to Taiwan that includes M1A2T Abrams tanks as well as surface-to-air missiles. Relations between Beijing and Taipei have deteriorated since Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen, a member of the island's pro-independence Democratic Progressive Party, took office in May 2016. China suspects the leader to be seeking formal independence with support from Washington. But in order for them to do something like this, man, they have to have global recognition. I mean, they would be isolated just like Israel was isolated for a long time. And I mean, the only reason Israel gets really the support that it does because it can kind of, buy their way into political representation. But Taiwan, I don't know, man. The United States may be the only country that actually recognizes it fully.
Yeah.
But you're talking about $8 billion deal for some F-16s, and the F-16s are still relatively strong fighter jets in comparison to whatever China has. I mean, I think the strongest thing that China has right now is like the Sukhoi 34. I think that's what they have.
They don't have the 37s?
No, they don't have 37s. Moscow won't sell it to them. But I know the last thing they had was either Sukhoi 34 or 35s. Because they had tried to copy the other ones and they were falling out of the sky because they were junk. And they were looking to Russia for help, and Russia told them to go screw because you shouldn't have stole the design. Yeah, I don't think China really has a response to this because their fighter jets are not nowhere near as new as this and nowhere near advanced as what the F-16s are. These are new block planes. These aren't old. I mean, DE could probably speak more to this, but this is they got a new warship last year, okay, a new destroyer, okay. They got new tanks last month from Trump, and now they have new jets. I don't know.
The technology on board that airplane, that is a competitive airplane, even if you throw it up against the F-35. Seriously, the F-15, the F-16s were made to take over from the F-4, and the F-4 was the best in the fleet at the time.
You saying the F-4? F-4 Phantoms?
In Vietnam, the F-4 was the leading fighter. You understand?
Yeah, but
and the next generation after that,
out of the skies too.
Yeah, but those were the only thing that they had that can compete with the MiG.
Yeah, the MiG-21 was was something relatively new that still to this very day is still formidable.
So
and then
you
they came
bring
out with
in
then they came out with the Foxbat,
right.
the big, and that
Yeah,
and they brought out the F-16, the
right,
F-15 Eagle and the
right,
F-16
right.
to compete and
To
take that and
compete.
take and call it the Foxbat killer to try to knock it
Right,
out. The F-16 was supposed to F-15 especially was supposed to be a air superiority
right,
jet fighter. It was supposed to
right,
put everything in the skies that was around it at risk.
right,
And it was it's still a very formidable plane
right.
to this day.
With the upgraded electronics, it
Yep.
is very good airplane. Serious.
It's still a
Unless you
very good
got
plane.
unless they can build something that's really stealth, not something that like falls apart after
Well, I think the Sukhoi 37 is a superior aircraft because of this, because of its Cobra
well, thrust
maneuvers
vectoring and all that. Yeah,
and its thrust vectoring. A
right,
supreme pilot in there is
right.
going to fuck you up. Okay,
Exactly.
there's just the performance of that aircraft is beyond what anybody's really doing today, including the the F-22s as well.
Well, keep in mind that China doesn't have a response to that from the aircraft perspective. They're
Right.
still, they still are holding on to a little bit of antiquated technology for the most part. A lot of their planes that are indigenous, the J-21, I think it is probably the most exclusive, and that hasn't been put into test at all. It hasn't been tested at all. But the only way they can stop an F-16 is with a S-400 missile, surface-to-air missile system. So. You would hope that China doesn't, in order for those missiles to actually hit those F-16s, they would have to actually go into Chinese airspace, and I don't think Taiwan's foolish enough to fly into Chinese airspace, crowded airspace.
Hold on, don't the Chinese have the fulcrums?
Say that again.
I'll ask this. Do the Chinese have the MiG fulcrums?
I think they had the F-31.
The 29s and don't
Yeah, I
have
think
the-
they had the 29 and 31.
yeah, I
have the multi.
think they have the fulcrums, which is
Yeah.
a significant aircraft as well.
Yeah,
they
but
have-
if you're a Taiwan, you wouldn't let them get off the ground. But seriously,
That's what I'm saying.
the F-15 can stand off and hit that airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't have Russian pilots flying it. You understand? The Russian pilot is a different genre to the Chinese pilot.
Well, I think you have enough. If you practice long in that plane, you could become pretty good. But the Fulcrum was a very capable. It's a very capable aircraft. Great dogfighter and an excellent bomber as well. So
Well,
I don't know. Anyway, I thought they had them, so I thought that would at least give them some level of parity. But anyway, go ahead, gentlemen. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say that.
But it's not only the airplanes. You got to look at the electronics. Because the Russians not going to give to Chinese the best electronics.
No, they got to make.
Not only that, but the weapon systems on it. The air-to-air missile systems that the U.S. has on the F-15 and F-16, is like the Chinese might be good, but the U.S. air system.
But the Chinese are pretty smart too. They're not stupid. They know how to how to re-engineer and do certain things. They're not stupid because they damn sure put together a black jet. They were able to put stealth fighter. They damn sure were able to.
Well, that's because they captured it mostly whole.
They captured it and then re-engineered it. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, they captured it mostly whole, but these Sukhois and MiGs that they tried to copy were falling out of the sky. This was not that long ago, and they were like, Russia, can you help us with this? Russia said, I don't think so. That's not our bag. Stop stealing our technology, basically. And I think that's when they had to start copying a lot of U.S. Planes.
Yeah, they were.
They were getting the full package, whereas with the MiGs and the Sukhois, they were just basically getting the bare frame, and then they had to add their own electronics and whatnot to it.
Especially with the thrust vectoring technology of that. Like I said, the Sukhoi 37, I believe it's not so much a stealth plane, but I believe as far as performance, that is of the best planes that are out here. on Earth right now.
I don't know. For me, for Chinese to take Taiwan, they would lose probably what, a third to half of their military.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
not
think
only
so? A third to a
Air
half?
Force.
That's a lot. But
Oh
you may
yeah,
be right.
Yeah.
You may be right.
aircraft.
You may be right about it. You may be right.
Those
The
landing
aircraft,
ships would be taken out.
right? Aircraft and Navy. They would lose so much of their aircraft and Navy that it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah,
I mean, the
you may be
Russians
right
will
about
have
that.
to step in to help them.
Yeah, you may be right. You may be right about that.
They would,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Russia would have to close off the straits on the opposite side to keep the U.S. from coming
Yeah.
in from Guam.
Coming in, yeah.
Yeah, they would have to do that. But like you said, they would lose a third of their guys going in because all those landing ships would be destroyed. Because remember that Taiwan is not just one solid island; it's made up of multiple other islands too. All those other islands have deterrences on them, and trying to fly through those identification zones, Taiwanese would shoot down every single last of those planes going in.
Oh yeah, everything along the coast of China will be shut down. Serious. All their military installations will be torn up along the coast of China. The only thing that would survive is probably the north, from the northern half of China.
Yeah, the East China Sea. They would have to. Taiwan would have to get aggressive and go in there and just take out all their air defense batteries and then hit their runways and keep their planes on the ground.
Yeah,
that would have to be
that's
proactive.
exactly what would happen. Yeah, take out everything, all the airstrips, all the Navy bases. That's the first thing you take out. You can't come back home. Anything at sea can't come back home.
Yep. All the sea mines littered across the straits. That would be a very bloody disaster for China to go in. May not be worth it to them.
Nope. Not right now. It's not worth it at all. Period.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, Christopher Clipper, you have the F-15, you have the Super Eagle as well, which is even a more ramped up F-15, and it is it's a bitch. So we still do have some rather dangerous aircraft, and I know we have that Aurora that's out there that people are not talking about, but that's some next level shit. But the F-15 is right now is still a world class aircraft, and the Super Eagle is it's no joke.
All right, let me get to this next one from RT.com. Houthis shoot down U.S. military drone over Yemen. Bunch of guys in sandals and flip flops taking down U.S. military hardware. U.S. military MQ-9 drone was shot down in Yemen's Damar Governorate, southeast of Houthi-controlled capital Sana'a. Reuters reported 2 U.S. officials as saying on Wednesday. The officials confirmed that the drone was shot down late on Tuesday. A Houthi military spokesman had earlier been quoted by the rebels Al-Masra TV as saying that their air defenses had brought down a U.S. drone. In June, the U.S. military said the Houthi rebels had shot down a U.S. government-operated drone with assistance from Iran. U.S. forces have occasionally launched drone and airstrikes against Yemeni group Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP. So, you see these guys with sandals and Crocs running around taking down multi-million-dollar U.S. drones.
Crocs.
Yeah, that's what it looks
like.
Taking
them out with their Crocs on.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Look, I'm as I look at what's happening in the world and the technology that the U.S. is losing. One of these days, these guys are going to use one of those same drones to attack U.S. bases around the Middle East. Not just one base, but multiple bases around the Middle East. And then what the U.S. going to do? You can't bomb. You can't just go in and bomb the whole country because I think the Russians and Chinese are what keeping this from happening. The Houthis are focused themselves only on Saudi Arabia, but one of these groups, as the technology spreads, because when somebody shoots down one of these drones, the technology gets shared.
Oh yeah.
And, and the same people who the U.S. be working Al Qaeda, they build up, gonna start using these things against them.
Hmm.
So this is one funny piece of war that I'm watching and hoping uh,
Yeah,
that it don't get worse, man.
yeah. I mean, they probably do have enough educated people to actually reverse engineer something like this themselves. You know, they'll probably rebadge it or rename it as the chancleta. You know, the sandal drone. So
Oh
it's like,
yeah, what do you think Iran did with the one they shot down? They took the make one just like it,
yeah.
and now they are not only they make it, but now you really got a replica that you can use for any kind of airfoil, any type of airplane. Now you're looking at, because you got the technology, not only the technology fly it, but the technology what it's made of. It's made, the drone is like almost like a stealth piece of equipment.
Hmm.
So now you got that technology, and you can either make it bigger or you can duplicate it.
Hmm.
You can make it like the Russians got this one that carry 20,000 pounds of ammo. The Iranians can take and do the same thing.
Yeah, they basically took a Russian bear, the Tupolev old turboprop plane, and basically remade it into a drone. It can actually it actually flies. There's a video of it flying, man. I know we talked about it, but the actual video tells the truth about it.
Yeah.
All right, this last one is from RT.com. Macron lectures Putin on right to protest amid own crackdown on yellow vests. Emmanuel Macron took the opportunity to tell Russia's Vladimir Putin that a true democracy should treat protesters with respect. In France, anti Macron protests have been met with police batons for the last 40 weekends. The two leaders met ahead of the G7 summit, which Russia will not be a part of, to talk about issues both bilateral and international. Amid the mostly amicable exchange, the French president scaled the moral high ground to admonish Putin for his treatment of protesters at home. We called this summer for freedom of protest, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and the freedom to run in elections, which should be fully respected in Russia, like for any member of the Council of Europe. Macron said at a joint press briefing at his summer residence on the French Mediterranean coast ahead of the 3.5 hour long talks with Putin. Referring to a series of opposition protests that were held in the Russian capital in recent weeks, the French leader urged Russia to abide by international agreements guaranteeing the freedom of speech and freedom to gather. That's funny because black people don't have that sort of freedom in America, but whatever. That is why a lot of people were
Mm.
concerned with what is going on in Moscow with all the arrests that were made by police. Both Western political establishment and, and media have been gripped by the news of the rallies in Moscow. What they have not been nearly as thrilled about, though, are the ongoing yellow vest rallies in France itself. The country, which, according to Macron, has always respected all of the rights of its citizens, has seen protests for the past 40 weekends, larger than those in Moscow, and met with a much tougher police response. While in the latest rallies in Moscow were indeed marred by occasional instances of violence and resulted in an unusually high number of detentions, which gave the Western media an opportunity to present it as a crackdown. They still have a long way to go compared to what the French yellow vests have been enduring. Originating as a protest against a planned fuel tax hike last November, the protests have since turned into a broader movement opposing the policies of Macron and his government. Over the months, which saw demonstrations every weekend, the rallies repeatedly spiraled into clashes between protesters and police. Law enforcement never hesitated to use not only batons and tear gas, but also non-lethal guns firing 40 millimeter rubber bullets and instant tear gas grenades, explosive munitions packing 30 grams of TNT. 30 grams of TNT. That's like a cherry bomb going off on you. This has resulted in thousands of protesters suffering various, sometimes life-changing injuries like lost eyes and limbs. Damn. In July, hundreds of people even joined the March of Mutilated in Paris to protest police brutality. Putin himself made a reference to the Yellow Vest protest, saying that Russia does not want to see uncontrolled violence on its streets and that citizens are given opportunities to express their opinion in a peaceful and legal way. Our people have the right to voice their protest. The authorities need to make sure that this right is upheld, the Russian leader said, adding though that the idea of respecting that right should not be reduced to absurdity. It should not lead to clashes. Anyone responsible for violence should be held accountable under Russian law. You support protests in other countries, but when it comes to Black people and their civil rights, you seem to not really care too much. Interesting, Mr. Frenchie. All right, let me see if there's anything in the chat. Carl's opinion says, I still haven't figured out the civil war in Yemen. I don't know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, or if there even is such a thing. Any thoughts on generally? So yeah, in Yemen, what happened was that the president of Yemen requested that Saudi Arabia ran to Saudi Arabia for refuge and away from what they call Houthis or Ansar Allah, which is the movement in Yemen, who are in opposition to the government itself, which the government ran to Saudi Arabia to get some help from the Saudi Arabian government um, or the monarchy to actually respond to the opposition, which is the Houthis, which is what they call them. The Houthis would be the equivalent of the Black Panther Party actually taking office, political organization, and you know the Saudis think that they have the ability to really control them. The real truth behind the matter is that Yemen is sitting on lots and lots of oil and natural gas, and that Saudi Arabia does not really have a whole lot of resources left to tap. And if Yemen is able to tap those resources, it would put them on the same equal footing as Saudi Arabia and UAE in terms of wealth. It would look like Bahrain for the most part because it will be a overnight success. That being said,
and also, and Mike, also just height the reason why you have so much unrest there is so much of the poverty that's going on in Yemen, unlike the lack of there's some poverty in Saudi Arabia, but not at the levels that they have in Yemen, and that is was controlled by more despotic rulers, and these guys are kind of looking to get rid of them as well.
Mhm.
Let's keep that open. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, nobody wins a war going into Yemen. I don't care who it is. It's historically proven that all militaries that go in are defeated. Egypt was the last military to go into Yemen in 1979 and got the asses handed to them, lost 30,000 guys in a very short amount of time, which is it's an actual military defeat for any military. You lose that many guys in such a short amount of time. So the objective is to bust the backs of the rebels, the opposition, so that they surrender and actually restore order. But if you look at a lot of the videos, they have millions upon millions of people behind them. It even have an all-female brigade with those
Yeah, they do.
Kalashnikovs.
Shit.
They're not playing around, so they're not going to leave just because Saudi Arabia says so. And when you have guys in sandals and Crocs taking down drones and messing up your operations in your own country, that spells that speaks volumes about where they are and where you are militarily. They sent ground troops in, mostly Africans and Colombians, cartel members, to actually go in there and try to take them out, and all of them have been defeated. So keep in mind, these are guys with sandals. These are guys with wraps around their heads and haven't bathed in 2 years because the water filtration
and
systems have been down.
and they, and they stand next to those rocks and those little kind of mountainous areas that they're running around in, and they actually look like freaking rocks and shit. I swear to God, they do. Man.
Yeah.
These guys, they almost like blend into the background. I mean, it's crazy. So, and Saudi Arabia has been embarrassed going in there. They've actually been embarrassed.
They took out a UAE warship. They had a coastal. They used one of those anti-warship missiles, man, like an Exocet, man, and took that sucker out, man. Sent it right back to UAE limping.
That's where Bin Laden's family originally came from, Yemen. The Yemenis.
Yeah, Christopher Clipper asked in the chat, isn't Iran supplying them? Iran isn't supplying anything to the Houthis other than intelligence. But the missiles that you see, the armaments that they have, they bought it from North Korea during the collapse of the Soviet Union, which North Korea made out a pretty good penny, and gave Yemen, which was two countries at the time. You had North Yemen and South Yemen. They emerged into one country after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So all those missile armaments came after the Soviet Union collapsed. So they have about 10,000 missiles. They had MiG fighter jets, and that was the first thing that the Saudis came in and did, was they took out the fighter jets. So that's why they don't have an air force. But so Iran is not supplying them anything other than intelligence. But for all intents and purposes, they're fighting on their own. You have Hezbollah down there. You have Hamas. You have Africans on the ground over there as well. So this is a resistance movement.
You know, they keep increasing the range on those missiles too. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The missiles have at least 500-kilometer range. But 500 kilometers from Yemen is all the way into Riyadh and Jeddah.
Yeah, 500 clicks. That's over 600 miles. So,
yeah.
Listen, it's pretty ill. Like I said, that whole region, the Yemenis, they've been a resistant fighting force for a very long time, and they've shown not to be easy to be defeated. It's kind of how they fight, and
Carl's opinion asks, is it religious, political, capitalism, versus socialism? What do the Houthis want? What is their agenda? What they want is to kick the Saudis out so that they can have some form of control over the country. If you keep bombing them, then yeah, they're gonna keep fighting back. But if you expect them to if you're expecting them to leave, that's just not going to happen.
The Houthis are not going to give up. They've been at this. This is This is actually the third round of fighting that they've been involved in. They made 2 agreements with the original government in Sana'a that were broken because of the Saudis.
Yep, that's true. Good point. I forgot about that, but that's a good point. That's a good point right there.
Each time when the government thought that they say, well, we got to a position now where we can just go in and take over. And when the pushback came, it was the government who was running.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right there. You said when Houthis get control, what is their agenda? To control the country and exploit the resources in the ground. You keep in mind that Yemen's only poor because of their they're in a bad neighborhood. You have Egypt, who doesn't like them because they sit right there by the Red Sea, and can control the shipping. Right, they can put a blockade into the Red Sea, and then you take Saudi Arabia and UAE, who largely benefited from the downfall of the country. You know, they created their own little metropolis. And then you have, you know, U.S. military sitting on the opposite side in Africa, man, across the water.
But you got the Saudi, all this has to do with Saudi money.
Yep.
And the Saudis, the way the Saudis push their money around, that's why Egypt got involved in the first place.
Mhm.
Because the Saudis were like proxy, or a proxy for Israel, which in turn they create proxies for themselves. And Egypt was one of their proxies.
Yeah. All right, it's past 12, man. We're gonna actually close this out. So thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those on the community tab as we post it every week. And we will be back tomorrow for Black Crypto Talk.
All right. Hey, shout out to Art Neutral TV. Welcome,
Yeah.
bro.
Yeah, shout out to Art, man.
Ó, Nostaro, tudo bem, amigo? Liga-me depois, tá? Gostaria de falar com você, tá? Obrigado. Okay, guys. Boa
All right,
noite
guys.
para todos.
Okay.
Boa
Good
noite.
night.
Shalom.
Boa noite. Shalom, Mike.